Kat, thank you so much for taking the time to do this interview. I appreciate it.
Well, same. I appreciate it too. I mean, I love to connect also with the interviewers and talk a little bit about what I've made. So we're good. Yeah, I'm happy to be here.
I'm actually very new to your music because Katie, your press person, we've worked together for a long time. Like I've some of her artists that I've interviewed and whatnot.
Yeah.
And when I saw the description of your like dark folk, whatever, I was like, sign me up. I need to.
Yeah.
I absolutely loved what I heard.
Okay, that's good. Yeah, that's good to hear. Yeah.
I'm curious to ask you too, because I know here in the States, there seems to have been kind of like a rise in popularity with this kind of Scandinavian, European dark folk music. I mean, like I've seen bands like Heilung and Wadruna, and these bands are really making a big impact here in America.
Yeah.
How do you feel about that? And like, why do you think it is that this music is kind of transcending the international barriers and actually connecting with American audiences?
Well, it's really nice actually to see that it seems to connect to all kinds of audiences, not only in America, but also we see the rise in Europe and even further than that in Asia. So I think there's something to this type of music and the music genre that we have created, where people really want to connect with something that has a little bit more depth than maybe just like your average pop songs that you hear on the radio. We see actually a large community taking place in the audiences that come to live shows to these types of genres. And of course, it's a little bit more going in the ambient direction, and the thematics that we are using is paganism and animism and reviving these old traditional historical instruments, but also the folklore and wisdom behind it. And so I think collectively what we see is that just a lot of people do really have a need to feel a little bit deeper into their roots and to say, okay, what is it actually that we have learned as the human species in the past, and in how we can, be interconnected with nature and work as a team. And, especially in the modern day and age, we seem to have lost a little bit of that direct connection and immersion, with our surroundings and collaboration. Instead, we see a little bit more that the human race is more consuming, the natural resources that we have. So the type of music that you're describing and artists who are also colleagues of mine and collaborators, I think that one of their our main leading message is to reconnect people back to each other, to nature, and to our history. So that seems to be a mantra for all of us. At least it has been for mine since I started out with making this music. We're talking actually about going back in time 15, 20 years, so long before this indeed became a little bit more well-known. And, I myself included, and also the artists you mentioned, and attached to that even more artists who work with this material, nobody saw coming that it actually would have such a surge in interest. But it's really nice to be able to have a little bit of a broader reach and just continue to do what we love and work with these really old, beautiful instrumentations for larger audience. So yeah, I think that's about it. That summarizes it a bit. Yeah.
Well, so I love that because one of the things I think the first exposure I had to something like this, and and like I said, like I'm an old dude. I'm 50 years old, so like I grew up like listening to classic heavy metal and and even American folk music because that's what my parents were into. But I think it was probably about 10 years ago or so when I first I'm gonna totally butcher their name. Elvati?
Elevati, yeah,
The
from
Vati. Oh, I was so close. See, I should
Mm,
totally live there. But I mean, like, I can't tell you that was, that was the first time I ever saw someone playing a hurdy-gurdy
exactly,
in a
yeah,
heavy metal band,
yeah,
and the singer playing the flute, and I
yeah.
just remember thinking I was so, amazed by that because being an older music fan, I mean, to me, it was kind of like similar to like, when I would see a new modern American folk singer. And
Yeah.
so it really got me interested in the concept of this kind of music. And so as I dove more into, Wadruna, Hailung and whatever, a couple of those, the only reason I list those two is because those are the two I've listened to a lot,
Yeah.
and I know that there's many more out there.
Hmm.
But one of the things I loved is that you guys like you're still able to sing in your native language, and even though I don't understand the words, I understand the emotion, the feeling of it, if that makes sense.
Well, yeah, of course it makes sense because, even beyond the use of lyrics and language, I think music is the most powerful tool to connect with another person or another living being on an emotional level. I mean, we know that music, of course, it's vibration and the frequencies that we use in music, especially when you look at these old nature instruments who work on a harmonic frequency.
Mhm.
They literally touch us, not only our brain waves, but also our cells in our body. So, I mean, in that sense, this music really connects, of course, to the heart. And what I find interesting with the language is that, yeah, sometimes it just transcends the language, and maybe it also has to do with the way the lyrics or the singing is performed or is used, because it's really a way of singing together and creating these bigger choruses with a lot of harmonization, where we can sort of pick up uh, in a funny kind of comparison. It's almost like a concert such as this feels for a lot of people similar to going to church, if I'm not offensive here. Like, because a lot of people come together there and sort of have this communal moment to listen to something that is also performed with a certain reverence
Mhm.
and solemnness to the music, to say, okay, yeah, we actually honor the wisdom of the past and we take from it what is relevant today. And with my album SÁLA, that was also one of the main aims, is that I wanted it not only to have just like a good music performance on the instruments, but I wanted to have different layers of depth. So lyrically, a lot of people can, if they want to dive deeper into the material, and they will find layer upon layer, having worked with linguistic experts or even academic researchers going into a little bit the deeper, darker corners of Nordic mythology, and also these old ancient text sources that we still have today, to say, okay, what pieces in here are still really kind of diamonds in the rough, and can we bring out in our lyrics, because there's a little piece of wisdom ingrained in them that apparently our ancestors hoped perhaps that we picks up on, because why else back in the day would they have taken the effort to write it down? Because in those days, then it must have been something meaningful. So for me, yeah, especially at least in my work, but I know also the colleagues that you mentioned are also using in this practice lyrical work. It's also not only about singing them with feeling and emotion and having that emotional depth to it that can touch another heart, but it's also the content of the lyrics. They do have a little bit of Well, teaching and insight and wisdom in them, if people are seeking out that road. For me, at least, this has been like one of the most fun things to do in my production, is to actually do the research in the background. For me, it really adds something to it. And then on top, I connect it to very personal human emotions and personal life experiences, so that for me it clicks. But of course, hopefully for anyone who listens to it, I think we can all relate to topics such as heartbreak, illness, loss, grief, betrayal, victory, so these are like really big life arching kind of themes. And then to connect that with some text that we see from history, I think really gives a nice, combination of the present and the past. So, yeah.
Something I feel like sometimes is missing from not even just American music, but just modern music in general, because I feel like sometimes songwriters, whatever, they're kind of written for the point of, can this be a hit song? Can this be a radio song? Can this be a song absorbed by a huge mass of people? So when you're writing and you're working on these songs, what is that your goal at all? Or is your goal more like, I just want to express myself, and whoever hears it, that's good?
It's a little bit of both. I'm not saying that we are completely free of not having really thought out, okay, which part of this text, for example, or a piece of lyric can be the best fitting to create a hook of sorts, or something that is what I would say a key line in the whole of the lyrics of a song, so that we can emphasize it in a chorus or lift it up, by literally creating it bigger in the arrangement, and to have those more traditional ways of writing in there with verse, chorus, verse, etc. But for the most part, my lyrics, my songs in general, have kind of taken a new route in songwriting, because they are sometimes really large bodies of text, partially crafted from this historic source material, but for a large part actually also newly written by myself. So like poetic texts that I feel are more a little bit of a passing on, like a little bit of more of a channeled type of wording. And then there really, I break with any conventional song structure. So for example, one of the songs on my new album is Stone Pillars. It's the first song actually in English. So that's interesting for maybe the American audience as well, because there we actually get away from the language barrier and suddenly become a lot more vulnerable and visible in the album. It's the heart of the album, where we are also breaking with conventional song structure, because it's really more performative, almost like a musical play of like a visionary story that I have in my head. And so it moves from scene to scene, but not necessarily is made to be a standard pop song of 3.30 seconds for radio. So it really has the aim to tell a story. I think for me, that is in songwriting one of the most essential things that I'd like to do with using music and song, is to tell a story. And so then, sometimes it's nice to actually break the predictable and just let the song take you to a whole new structure.
And what is it? 'Cause that's so funny, because you actually kind of answered my next question, and that was, from your perspective, do you feel that sometimes, like, if you were to translate like a song into English from your native language, do you feel like you're compromising, or do you feel like you're losing something in that? But I noticed that you said that there's a more of a vulnerability to it, to you. So is that is it still kind of a compromising loss of message for you, or do you feel like you're like, okay, this is going to be more of a stronger impact?
Well, it kind of depends on the origin of the song. In this case, with the English songs, they were actually, when I wrote the poems, sort of before they became songs,
Mhm.
they were written in English because that's how the words came to me,
Okay.
and the thoughts. And then, of course, it wasn't really sure what type of song it would become and what type of sound. But soon I realized, hey, this is going actually into the direction of the album that I'm creating with the Nordic dark folk. And it's really part of the story that I'm telling here, and of the cycluses, of these 9 waves, these 9 daughters of the ocean goddess Ran. And so I thought, yeah, let's break sort of self-imposed rules that every song needs to come from a Nordic song. Because for me, actually, I'm originally Dutch, which means that all the lyrics are on this album foreign tongue for me, including Icelandic, New Norse, Norwegian, Bokmal, Old Norse, and English. So it didn't really matter for me to break with the Old Norse use of words in these few English songs that are also on the album, because it's in a broader sense, it's really more about bringing this journey on the album, this story, and yeah, for example, Stone Pillars. I thought it was actually perfectly fitting to what I'm singing about, to say, let's also make that accessible to like all of the English speaking and understanding world directly, really from the heart to heart, because it's kind of a heavy piece. It talks about the moment where you start to question your own sanity
Mm.
and question if you're going mad or not. And it goes in depth into the topic of the need rune, or the nauder rune, the Old Norse word for need, and all that entails. And so it felt actually very fitting, like it had to be like that. Not necessarily vulnerable, but definitely with less of a mask of sorts that sometimes Nordic languages do also have that effect on a
Ah.
large audience, because it's not directly understandable what you're singing. So yeah.
And that to me was kind of like what I was touching on earlier, is that like another band that I really just got into, and they're not dark folk though, but it's a band from Sweden called Dina Ogen, and
Yeah.
they're kind of like a funk band, and I can't understand any of the lyrics, but when I listen to it, I go, okay, I kind of can feel like what she's singing about. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
there's something kind of exciting and something cool that, like, when you don't have the transparency
Yeah.
of knowing what they're saying word for word,
Yeah.
that you have to use your mind and your body to kind of say, okay, this is what I feel like they're
Mhm.
singing about.
Yeah.
And musically, it's moving me. So
Mhm.
in some ways, it's almost like the lyrics don't really matter, but yet I know, you know what I mean? Like when I was listening to your album, one of my first thoughts was, okay, I don't really know what she's saying in this particular song, but I know it's something very intense and very, like I couldn't stop listening,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
And it's one of my favorite albums of the year. And
Wonderful.
but I
Yeah.
couldn't sing a single song. you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
I'm sure
Yeah.
if I
Well,
tried to sing
lucky
along,
we
all the
have
words would be wrong.
lucky we have at least English translations for those who want to go into it. But I think it's a really good sign, actually, if a song can carry a tune without needing to understand
Yeah.
the language, because it means that on other levels the message is also conveyed and coming through. And of course, when we use the voice, we are in essence extending our breath. And in
Mm.
old folklore, the idea is that your soul is connected to your breath. And so what this means,
Oh,
you're
yeah.
singing, you are actually bringing out your soul and vocalizing what is on your heart and on your soul. So no matter the language per se, it is through that use of breath and emotion that we have in the voice that we can still collectively recognize, oh, this is a happy moment, this is a sad moment, or here someone is really in the midst of doing a specific performance. Like in my case, on my album, it could be even a moment where we prophesize or where we solemnly do spell work, like do a
Right.
go mantra. So it doesn't really, in essence, then it means you have to really literally understand the words, but still you will feel it on every level of your being because it's from one soul to another. And I think there, through the breath, through the voice, we can always collectively recognize something in there. And if we want to, of course, be open to that. And so the same goes for the band that you mentioned, where you were dancing to their music performance and didn't quite understand them. You could still feel, a lot of the rhythms that we use in music worldwide from different cultures, they still, the more you go far back in time, they still will have the same root rhythms. And so music really is a connector and really is a bridge of culture and brings us closer together, or at least that really is my idea about this.
And I noticed also because so I'm a songwriter myself. I play folk music, but I play American folk music. Like I'm very inspired by 60s and 70s folk musicians. And so for me as a writer, it, lyrics are very important. I think at least for me being an American, I think because I hear so much music in America that is kind of senseless or like I feel like doesn't have emotion or doesn't tell stories.
Mhm.
Like I grew up in New Orleans, which is full of culture and voodoo, the superstition. And so I love to write and sing about those things because I like to kind of convey that those stories to people that never heard them. So I always wondered if, from your standpoint, like even though the music is very powerful, does it kind of bother you ever that knowing that there's an audience that might not understand the lyrics when in your mind you're going, I'm trying to tell you such a great story, you know?
No, it doesn't bother me whatsoever. I mean, because I think people take from music and different artists whatever is there for them to pick up upon. And I know that there will be some listeners who really love to go deep and really want to even read the same source material that you have used for your album. Like for me, I write them all down in the booklet. So if people want to go deeper, it's out there. And other people are just there to have a moment of enjoyment and just to actually put their minds on pause and just sort of relax to the music. And so I think in that sense, music consumption, it's different for everyone. And for me, I'm already happy if people that do resonate with it are able to find it and connect to it. And so it's not at all bothersome for me if someone doesn't really pick up on the finer detail of some background of lyrics. I'm a lyric kind of person. For me, that's an important part of why I listen to certain artists or enjoy them in particular, but it doesn't have to be. And we can all relate to also just having a night out for dancing and just and then we're really not going into like a deep story there. We just want to release our energy, and that's also, of course, how music is a great tool to use for that. So yeah, it's all up to the listeners.
I remember one night I was sitting in my studio here, and I took my nightly edible, and I sat in my chair, and my mind was kind of like I was like, oh, I was really high, and which I don't mind talking about. But anyway, I remember I was listening to I think it was to a Highling song, and in my mind it was this very, and I was like, what if they're talking about like how much they like chocolate, or like or that they like going on carnival rides, and they want me to think it's this, but and even though I was jokingly thinking that, one of the things that did strike is exactly what you said, was that uh, the lyrics didn't seem to matter.
Mm,
Because to me, I would almost assume that, like, if for an artist it mattered for you for American audiences to understand what you're saying, you would sing all your things in English.
mm.
So by singing in various native languages, or in, like you said, like ancient languages, that it's more about the feeling and the projection of the energy that you're getting from telling those stories.
Yeah, 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 I would say so. Yeah, I think, well, I'm happy that you could relax to to the music of Haydn. But I mean, yeah, this is the thing. People can use the music for their own purposes, and I think it's really nice that it can have these different purposes all in one.
Mhm.
So the same song can mean actually different things for everyone depending on what they are focusing on. And for me, I really like to work on that also as a producer. Like I
Mhm.
really like to put in additional layers that actually play also with the furthest edges of the human hearing.
Mhm.
Because for me, it's almost like approaching it as, for lack of a better term, sound healing of sorts. So I'm trying to add in certain frequencies and elements that are sort of giving another foundation to these songs, so that they carry, even if it's not necessarily words that we are focusing on.
I did notice in listening to the album that there seems to be I like to call it ear candy, if you I don't know if you know what that is, but basically it's like these little things
Yes.
that, like, you might not hear if you're like just on speakers, but if you put the headphones on, like, and I know it's one of the things you utilize. It's almost like this very kind of almost kind of a drone at times, where that's that frequency that that is usually used in meditation.
Yeah.
And that was kind of something, was that something that you purposely kind of look at and go, okay, there's
Yeah.
that specific tone. I know that if I use this, there's going to be a reaction of some sorts.
Absolutely. This is how I that actually shows a little bit more about my personality, because I also love to put in riddles into these songs. So for the people who do want to dive deeper and take a moment to go with headsets and really want to sort of observe everything that's going on in the panning, audibly and almost unaudibly, there will be a lot of gems to find. Not necessarily only drones. It could also be other sounds that we have
Mhm.
shaped and manipulated so that they are less obvious.
Mhm.
It could even be spoken word, or the sound that you describe as a drone could have also been certain nature sounds that we recorded, or something that relates to what I'm talking about. It can be door knocks, that I made
Mhm.
on a door in the little town called Kravik, on a door with an Odin seal on it, so stuff like that I'm putting in there, not because they are like the most beautiful sound in the world, but because they carry another layer to the song, another depth to it. And yeah, I love to do also lots of layers with whispers, and not only performed by myself, but also by other people on the album, that they give a foundation to the whole thing, even if you don't understand the lyrics.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's storytelling. Yeah,
With every sound carries a different feeling. Like, it's amazing how, like, you can hear, I don't know, like thunder and rain is soothing, but then sometimes a knock on a door can be jarring and kind of make you feel uncomfortable a little bit.
yeah, yeah,
And and I love the fact that you did utilize these just these parts of sounds, to really evoke that kind of emotion or feeling, because to
yeah.
me, there's nothing better in music than, like, when a song makes me feel uncomfortable.
Yeah.
That's a powerful thing. I mean, I feel like a lot of times music makes you feel good, but
Mm.
man, when music makes you feel a little like, ooh, like
Yeah.
that's a very intense, like you have to really try to do that.
Yeah. Yeah, I love stuff like that. I mean, if there's anything I'm starting to learn more and more is how much I love sound design and the job of sound design and Foley. So like more a little bit cinematic edge to music production and songs. But it's all for this purpose to convey emotion, and certain sounds just have that sort of biological effect on us. We don't really understand why, but it's so deeply ingrained in us that the hairs can stand up on our skin,
Mhm.
because of certain sounds and the associations we have with them. And yeah, I thoroughly enjoy putting as much in there as possible. And I also really find it important to not work around anything that is eerie or taboo. So
Mhm.
we have, I really, for example, have put in also sounds that really might be a little intense for people, like MRI hospital sounds, for example,
Mhm.
which is a sound that we collectively, unfortunately, nowadays can recognize as, oh, something serious, and often a difficult circumstance in life. But then to blend it in with mythology, and the same for sounds that we not necessarily know from songwriting. For example, sexual energy or,
Mhm.
or sexual sounds. We connect that unfortunately only to other industries, but they are actually one of the most life-giving forces that we have. So if you are having a song that is about life and death, why not actually embrace sounds that are also usually considered taboo?
Yeah.
But for me, they are actually beautiful. Every new life is created from sex.
Mhm.
So, for me, there are no rules when it comes to creating good storytelling music. As long as, we are all enjoying the process of making it, recording it, it's a safe space. And as long as it, of course, has a function, like everything is thought out, nothing happened by accident here. So, yeah.
And I love that you brought up the concept of the sexual sounds because again, I feel like you and I are of the same generation. And so when we were growing up, that was very taboo. And you associate those kinds of sounds or even that kind of topic of discussion
Yes.
as like, no, it's dirty. For someone like myself, I'm atheist. I'm not Christian or anything, but I've always related to paganism, in reading mythology and of different
Mm.
cultures. And those sounds of sex in general, to me, always come across as primal. It goes beyond that of the human species. I mean, we're talking every species
Exactly.
has some sort of a sexual connection in nature because that's how we have everything.
Exactly. This is something I really embrace also when we look at the feminine perspective on these Nordic myths. In this case, they are Nordic, but they can be myths from other cultures too. Yeah, especially from the feminine skaldic perspective. If we look at that, I think the women, in those older days, um, they were known to be the life givers, and that's something we kind of lost uh, to touch base upon without completely, yeah, over sexualizing it, and to say no, let's put that sexuality energy, life giving chi energy back into its original role and place. And also looking at the material that I've used, if we go into prophetic vulva cider performances or seances that were held, even back in the days, especially in the medieval times when Christianity was actually rising in the north, those things were forbidden.
Oh
Those
yeah.
kind of gatherings were suddenly
Mhm.
forbidden because, well, research shows that it might have also something to do with specifically this topic, and that those kind of old rituals, life-giving pagan rituals, were something to be suddenly frowned upon. So for me, it was good to shed light on that, but of course with a purpose, with the storytelling purpose, with the idea also of bringing these kind of darker corners of the Nordic myths a little bit more into the viewpoint and to say, okay, there's actually more to this than just a Viking warrior that we see now portrayed in the cultures that embrace kind of everything that comes from Scandinavia. There's actually so much more still to learn beyond the typical stereotypical warrior persona that we see in TV and video games and culture around this, suddenly more popular topic. So yeah, for this album, at least that has been my angle, and I really had a good time with bringing all those components on there. And also here again, it's not performing; it's really like embodying the material before it's recorded.
I've read a lot of Norse mythology. The female sex at that point embodied so much strength. But then somewhere along the line in history, all over the world, women became like marginalized into something smaller than the male species. But now I'm noticing, especially like with yourself and with lots of other female vocalists and bands that are fronted by these female, that female strength is starting to come back. Do you feel that yourself?
Well, yeah, I do. At least it seems to be that there's a little bit more loudness to this topic. Also in music, in people who enjoy music. There's a lot of debate currently going on about women in music and how to sort of break the glass ceiling that we see happening there. On the other hand, of course, there's the very, very common sense remark, like, wouldn't it be great if we reach the point where we have to stop addressing people as the female drummer or the female front singer? Wouldn't it be great if we were just like all there on our merits? But we shouldn't pass by the fact that we still have a little bit of a barrier to break here. And I think women are becoming a little bit more collaborative in talking about this topic and trying to, progress forward. So I do feel that there's a little bit of more like a search of a trend there. For me, it also became part of the album that I made, SÁLA, which is Old Norse for sea and soul. Mm-hmm. But also having made most of the songs already, when you're near the end of such a big production, you start to see sort of the forest from the trees. And then you realize, hey, we're actually telling a bigger story here. We're talking about so many feminine personas and characters from the past and the present time and what we are going through. So yeah, it seems to be that another purpose of this album has come more to the forefront there, with empowering that feminine wisdom and those segments also in the historic texts, where that could have been more brought to the forefront. So yeah.
So speaking of the album, would you mind telling me a little more about it? Because there is a lot of depth to it and a lot of emotion and power to it. But like you said, like the creative, process of not just writing, but the production and everything that you're involved with. Like, at what point does it start? And then at what point do you know that you're finished and that you're like, okay, this was the album I wanted to make?
Oh, that's a good question. And there's actually two questions in that. With the song production itself, knowing when you're finished, I think this is a point where you feel a song, like each song could be a separate story, really has been perfected to what you had in your mind. For me, I always hear a little bit in my mind where I want it to be. And this also means that sometimes I had to be very patient to collect all the necessary components that I would have liked to have in there to fully tell the story. But yeah, it's also a matter, like, the more you produce a song, like more and more you go into mixing, you start to notice, okay, we're recording less and less. We have little left to do with adding more layers or specific sounds that we need, or maybe nice guest performance, someone playing a particular type of instrument. And we are more and more looking at how the song is sounding and if every level of each particular element is where we want it to be. And that's when you are progressing out of songwriting and recording stages into that final stage of a song. So with this album, that happened at different intervals, of course, because some songs were created earlier than others.
Okay.
Because it's been an arc of 9 years of making this product. So there's a lot that can happen in there. But yeah, me and Jani Pehu, my producer from Finland, that I had recruited to finish this album with me, we took on like the main body of new songs to produce those together. And there we noticed it like, okay, now we are going into the mixing part, and we were just speaking, like hours listening to the songs, like, okay, where do we want to still tweak this or that? And it was really, really intense, very personal collaboration with him, because it's not anybody who wants to go that deep on an album. A lot of producers are more like working on a day-to-day, hourly fee. So
Right.
This was really something we created together of sorts. Like we jokingly called this our album baby, because it was really, we didn't want to compromise. Yeah, we just didn't want to compromise. So it was done when it was done. It took 2 months longer than expected, but we took that time for it. And with the other part of your question, the production itself, as I said, it took 9 years for me to gather resources, talk to academics, read the source material. For example, Neil Price, The Viking Way, or Odds Orval Saga, Secret Strafbak, Codex Regius, all these like materials. So that's like part of building foundation to make a product as this. And secondly, of course, to gather the right musicians for it, and guest musicians who are experts in their own field or instrument or voice and energy that they brought onto the album. And thirdly, it's also about life, the process of life. So I feel every song is something that I also personally, in my personal life, have connected to the topic that I'm embodying and embracing on these songs, so these themes. And that unfortunately is including heartbreak, is including grieving someone you have lost, is also including illness. I also had to deal with illness, hence also the MRI sounds. Everything that sort of has to do with growing in life and going through dark moments, and then also rising above them again and document it. So in a sense, it's also a little bit of a diary documentation of sorts, but of course brought into a bigger thing, so that it's something everyone can relate to and everybody can go deeper into if they want for the historical pieces.
I've been working on an album for 3 years. I can't even imagine 9 years. Like at that length of time, like you're really nurturing it. It's like you were just talking about, like you were making a baby of sorts, right?
Yeah.
But it really kind of is, right? Like you're nurturing it, you're letting it develop, you're letting it grow and whatever. Was it hard to finally let it go?
Yeah, well, yes and no. I think indeed, every artist can recognize themselves in this. No matter how long they worked on it, it's still kind of a decision to say, now we are there. Let's just, this is what it is now. And this is the best we can do right now. This is how we envisioned it. And, I think it's a good sign of growth if later on you look back and you're like, oh, I could have done this or could have done that. Or so I mean, that just shows that an artist is growing. I look at that with previous releases. I'm still very happy about them, but I also see, oh, I could have done this there or that there. I would have approached it then now differently. But for this album also, this is what it is right now. This is what it's become and how it had to be. That I think it's a part of also surrendering. It's the same like when I talked about that moment where you start to realize oh, we're more going into mixing now and balancing instead of writing or adding new recordings, you sort of ease out into it and you start to surrender it. And of course, its true birth is coming 24th of May this month. So it's very soon, but already with the first singles that came out, Son Pillars and Kolga 60, I was more proud than not, because at the moment, this is the best I can do as my gift to the world, or my humble offering. And yeah, who knows? Maybe in a few years or sooner, I will say, oh, I could have done that, but that's not the case. And we're probably onto other productions by then. So yeah, I just hope people are gonna resonate with it. But so far, the response has been really, really sweet and kind of unexpectedly emotional from other people. So I think we're on a good track here of releasing the baby and let the songs do their own thing, because they're not mine now anymore. They're really for the world. And yeah, exactly. It's like a mom. And now the song babies, they will grow up on their own and live their own lives. So that's that's parenting.
Well, I have to tell you, Kolga and Pillars are beautiful children. I can't wait to meet the rest of them.
Yeah. There's a bunch of rowdy ones in there. Yeah.
Live performance. Like I've seen like the performances that go with these kinds of artists. Again, like, I mean, it's like I almost feel like there's the whole country is on stage sometimes, like everybody. Same thing with Wardruna, is that they have found a way to replicate everything that's on an album into a live setting. Is this something that you're going to plan to do yourself?
Yeah, well, that's a good question. I actually was part of I was the first manager of helping bring Heilungsshow Lifa to stage. So I've been around the block to help build, bigger visual shows and bring people and technicians together for that. But for myself, we are in the talks of maybe doing something commissioned, but nothing of that is final or really, really sure. And I'm very open about that, because I do get the question a lot, and it's really flattering me. But it is a really big thing on its own to take on a live production. And, if you hear how precise I am with my audio production alone, you can imagine that the perfectionist in me is also present when it comes to a live show. And the way I would love to envision it is also a little bit more visually, and it's a matter of having the right opportunity come by and the right people coming together, and whether or not fate wants us to weave something like that of sorts, or like spin it into reality. I will have to see, but I'm open to it. But I'm also very much consider myself more a music producer than a touring artist. And I think this is also something that, as I see now in interviews, we're like more used to interview touring artists and bands, who really want to get on the road. And for me, the joy is mainly in the studio. And that's also something you learn about yourself along the way, doing this for 20 years now. It's like, okay, what kind of creature am I actually? So, yeah.
Live performances are done the minute they're finished, whereas like a recorded product is something that you're like, is there forever.
Yes, yes, yeah. But I would hope that no matter what we do, whether that's on a recording or on a stage, that it will be something where an audience can partake and try to, just really let it have some kind of, almost ritualistic effect. So for now, that is the album, and we'll see what comes next.
Well, all I can say is that if you come to the States, I don't care where you're at, I am going to be there, and I will be right up front.
That's amazing. That's the enthusiasm that will give some boost to these ideas. So.
If anything, you can just come stay at our house, and you can just play in my music room here. We'll just have a jam session.
Well, who knows? You never know, because touring is expensive. So we actually might have to take you up on a couch offer someday.
The offer stands, okay? So you just let me know.
Yeah.
Kati, it was great talking to you, and I really enjoyed getting to know you and your work, and you're a fascinating and wonderful individual, and I really appreciated you taking time to talk to me.
Thank you. I really like being here, and I love connecting with people, who really want to give my music a listen and go deeper into it. So it's been great. Yeah.
Instead of me, we seek things